My life had never been so scary. Everything seemed to be going according to a clear plan: a stable job, a cozy house, a loving wife, Emily, and my little son Jake, who was just beginning to say his first words. But one evening, as I stood at the stove preparing dinner, something in my world began to crack. Emily was at a work meeting. I made her favorite macaroni and cheese for Jake and left it for her. We always shared every little thing, her stories about office squabbles, my worries about projects. But for a few months now, I've been noticing something strange. She started coming home late, her voice sounding drier, and her laugh, which once sounded like music, now echoed with falsehood. That night, when I was setting the table, her phone was left on the kitchen table. And, ironically, it lit up. One message: "I can't wait to see you. You. Unforgettable." It was like a blow to the heart. I stood still, wondering whether to open the message. But the fear of the truth quickly disappeared, giving way to anger. A few touches of my fingers opened up a world that destroyed everything I believed in. The first message was short and seemingly innocent, but then I found others. They discussed things that I didn't know. Her late-night meetings were actually evenings with her boss, Douglas, in expensive restaurants and hotels. She shared things with him that she had previously told only me. This betrayal was not just physical. It was moral and destroyed the trust one had built over the years. But the worst part was that they discussed me. "He doesn't even know," she wrote. And Douglas would reply, "Your husband will never realize. He is so soft." I stared at the screen, feeling the rage building in my chest. It seemed like I was no longer breathing. But instead of screaming, I decided to remain silent. Calm is my weapon. If they think I'm soft, I'll show them the other side. I had a plan. And it will not be just a retaliatory strike. It will be their destruction, psychologically and morally. No one will escape the truth. I didn't say anything that night. When Emily came home, her face was radiant, as if nothing had happened. She gave me a quick kiss on the cheek and asked, "How was your day, my love?" Her voice was warm, but I could no longer hear her sincerity. She sat down at the table and started eating, talking about difficult work moments. I looked at her, trying not to show my emotions. "It's the same as always," I replied, smiling. It seemed to me that this smile was cutting into my face, but I could not show weakness. That night, as she fell asleep next to me, I lay in the dark, thinking about my next move. If she could hide these things from me, I could play her game. But I had to be cunning. Calm. Did they think I was soft? Then I would be the invisible predator in this game. At first, I decided to start with her phone. I already knew where to find the proof. Her chat with Douglas was the hiding place of their entire affair. The next morning, while she was in the shower, I took her phone and took screenshots of all the messages. Every word, every detail. Their plans, meetings, even the way she talked about me. "How naive he is," she once wrote. These words hit me the hardest. I realized that my plan of revenge had to be not only for her, but also for Douglas. He wasn't just her lover. He was her boss, who thought he had everything under control. That day I started working on my plan. I reached out to an old friend of mine from college, Tom. He worked in digital technology and once helped me create a business presentation that saved my career. "Tom, I need your help," I said when I called him. "It's personal." "Is it serious?" he asked. "Yes. And, to be honest, it's about betrayal." I explained the situation to him without going into too much detail. He agreed to help, but asked a question. "Are you sure you want to do this?" "Absolutely," I replied. "They have to pay for it." Tom set me up with access to programs that allowed me to track Emily's messages and calls in real time. I knew it was illegal and risky, but I didn't care. I had to know their every move. The first result was not long in coming. They planned a meeting on Friday night at a hotel in the city. My heart was pounding, not with pain, but with anticipation. Now I knew what to do. My plan was to make them expose themselves. And when they least expect it, I will put an end to this story. Friday began as a normal day. Emily was especially attentive in the morning. She made coffee, toast, and kissed me on the forehead before leaving for work. She was in her usual way and even added a little light-hearted laughter to put me at ease. "Don't forget to put Jake to bed at 8, she said. Of course, I answered with the same warm smile she was used to seeing. When the door closed, I picked up my phone and looked up her location through the program Tom had set up. Sure enough, she hadn't gone to the office, but to a hotel on the outskirts of town. My heart was pounding, but it wasn't panic. It was determination. I left Jake with my mom, making the usual excuse about an urgent matter at work. I was prepared with my phone, camera, voice recorder, and most importantly, my comm. When I arrived at the hotel, I saw her car in the parking lot. Next to it was a familiar black sedan that I had seen many times outside her office. Douglas's car. Everything became real. I went up to the reception. "Excuse me, my friend forgot some documents in your conference room. Can you tell me what room Mr. Douglas Frank has?" I asked, leaning closer to the desk. The young administrator smiled. "Room 302, sir." 302. Now I knew exactly where they were. I took the elevator, feeling the blood rushing in my ears. But when the doors opened on the third floor, everything in me calmed down. No anger, just cold clarity. I walked up to their room and heard laughter through the door. They were there, just a few steps away. I took out my phone, turned on my camera and pressed the record button. I had to capture this moment. At first I just stood there listening, but then I knocked softly. "Hotel service," I said, changing my voice. A second of silence. Then steps to the door. Douglas opened it, a slight look of surprise on his face, which immediately changed to shock when he saw me. "Randall," he said, staring at me like a ghost. But I didn't answer. I pushed the door open and saw Emily standing there, pale as if she had seen a ghost. She was standing a few steps away, pale, as if she had seen a ghost. "Hello, my love," I said in a calm voice, entering the room and deliberately leaving the door open. She tried to say something, but the words stuck in her throat. "Are you having a good time?" I asked, pulling out my phone and pointing the camera at both of them. "Randall, it's not what you think," she began, but I interrupted her. "You know, Emily, I didn't even think you were capable of this. But you have exceeded all expectations." I switched the camera to Douglas. "And you, bravo, boss. Your professionalism is off the charts." I took a few steps toward them, and they stood there as if paralyzed. "I didn't come here to shout or break dishes. No, I just wanted to see it with my own eyes. And now I have enough evidence." I turned around, heading for the door, leaving them in a stupor. "Wait for news from my lawyer," I said without looking back. On the way out, I could feel the adrenaline starting to wear off. But this was only the first step in my plan. I left the hotel without looking back, but a storm was raging inside me. It wasn't just a betrayal, it was the destruction of what I thought was our life. But instead of letting my emotions run wild, I focused. From that moment on, every step had to be precise and thoughtful. My plan was to strike in a way that would make them feel the full consequences of their actions. And most importantly, I wanted to do it in public. Their reputation, their position, their lives, all of it had to be shattered in the same way that my trust was shattered. When I got home, I did the most important thing, collecting evidence. I already had screenshots of their messages, a video of their stay at the hotel, and access to her phone. But that wasn't enough. I wanted to expose everything. I called Tom again. "Tom, I need to create an online presentation," I said. "I need a resource so that anyone can see the truth." "Are you sure?" he asked. "This is no longer a game, this is a real blow." "I'm sure," I replied. Tom helped create a website, simple and elegant, with a password for access. We called it Truth for Emily. There, I uploaded all the screenshots, videos, even statements from our joint accounts that showed how she used our money to have fun with Douglas. Douglas was her boss, and I knew that his career was built on creating the perfect image of a successful professional. I called his corporate HR department, introduced myself under a fake name, and said I had information about unacceptable behavior of one of the top managers. "We cannot disclose these details, but if you have evidence, please send it to us," they told me. I sent them just a few screenshots, nothing more. Enough to start an internal investigation. I reached out to a few friends who worked in the media. They had access to corporate chats, local news pages, and forums. We started spreading anonymous hints about betrayal in the company and unprofessional relations. It all looked like rumors, but we knew it would reach the right people. Emily didn't even realize that I knew. She would come home and try to play her role as the perfect wife. But I had already prepared the last act. A week later, I organized a family dinner with our friends and family. "We have some important news," I said, raising my wine glass as we all sat down at the table. Emily smiled, but her smile froze when I continued. "This applies to Emily. I think everyone should know that she has a life other than ours." I picked up my phone and connected it to the TV screen. Everyone in the room saw the messages, photos, and videos. Her mother gasped in shock, and her best friend put her fork down on the table. Emily tried to say something, but her voice was shaking. "It's not what you think." "That's exactly what I think," I replied coldly. After this scene, she ran out of the house, but the damage was already done. Her family, friends, even her parents, all learned the truth. 2 days later, I received an email from Douglas. He threatened to sue me for defamation. I replied with just one word: "Try me." He didn't dare. Instead, I found out a week later that he had resigned. And Emily lost everything she had ever had. It was not just revenge. It was retribution for what they had done. And although the pain remained, I knew that their lives would never be the same again. After everything went according to plan, I felt a strange sense of emptiness. The impact. The damage was done, the cards were dealt, and now Emily and Douglas had to live with the consequences. But something in me demanded more. Not just public exposure, I wanted them to feel what I felt: complete destruction. Douglas, I learned, was trying to save his business. After he resigned from the company, he returned to private practice, but clients began to shun him. I made sure that every potential partner knew that he was not only incompetent, but also ethically questionable. My anonymous campaign through social media and business forums worked flawlessly. Emily, for her part, was left without support even from those closest to her. Her parents couldn't look her in the eye, and her friends kept their distance, not wanting to be drawn into her scandal. Her life, which had previously seemed flawless, was coming apart at the seams. But it was not enough. I realized that they needed a final point. Something that would make them not just live with the consequences, but question their own choices. And that's when the idea came to me. I knew that Douglas was involved in several large projects that had not yet materialized. One of them was an important construction contract that had to bring him millions. Through my contacts in the construction business, I arranged for a potential partner to learn about Douglas's fragile reputation. When the contract fell through, I received a message from one of my contacts. "This guy is no longer in the game." As for Emily, I had a surprise in store for her that she couldn't have predicted. Knowing that she would try to reconnect with some of her friends, I sent them photos and screenshots that proved her lies. I also created an email and wrote it on behalf of Douglas. Emily, you knew what you were doing. We both made mistakes, but I'm not going to take responsibility for both of us. I sent it directly to her, with a copy to her closest friends. It didn't just cause a scandal. It put them both in a situation where each considered the other a traitor. A few weeks later, I ran into Emily by chance at the grocery store. She looked exhausted, her face seemed pale and tired. She saw me and froze, as if she was trying to decide whether to run away or approach. "Randall," she said quietly, coming closer. I looked at her calmly. "Hi, Emily. How are you?" You destroyed me," she whispered, her voice trembling. I leaned closer so that only she could hear. "No, Emily. You've destroyed yourself." Her eyes were filled with tears, but I felt no pity. She had chosen this path herself. My life gradually began to return to normal. I focused on raising Jake, trying to be a better father to him than I had been as a husband. My sense of satisfaction was as calm as the water after a storm. Emily left town a few months later, but I didn't follow her life. I wasn't interested in it anymore. And Douglas? He was an example of how a reputation can be destroyed in an instant. I learned that revenge is not just about punishment. It is liberation. And now I was free. My life seemed to be getting back to normal. Jake started going to kindergarten, and that distracted me from the memories. But there was an emptiness inside that even my carefully planned revenge could not fill. One morning I woke up to a ringing phone. It was a number I didn't recognize. I answered it, and a male voice on the other end said, "Are you Randall? We found your number in our contact list." "Yes, it's me." "Who is it?" My heart suddenly clenched with anticipation. "This is Detective Carter from the local police department. Have you met Emily Franklin?" "Yes." "What is it?" A few seconds of silence seemed like an eternity. Then he answered. "We found her in a rented apartment. She is in critical condition. We need someone close to her to come to the hospital." I froze. It was like a punch in the stomach. My revenge was perfect, I had convinced myself. But now it all seemed like a cheap farce. I rushed to the hospital, not even thinking about what I would say if she came to. There was a tense silence in the ward. Emily was lying on the bed, her hands tied straps, and next to her was a machine that measured her blood pressure and pulse. Her face, once so lively, was now pale and wasted. "What happened?" I asked the doctor, trying to stay calm. "An overdose," he answered. "She took too many sleeping pills with alcohol. It looks like a suicide attempt, but we can't draw any final conclusions yet." I felt the ground slipping away from under my feet. My revenge was perfect. But I never wanted to bring it to this point. Something inside me was breaking, and that crack started to expand, threatening to destroy all that is left of me. Emily opened her eyes only a few hours later. They were empty, as if she had already given up fighting for herself. "Why are you here?" she whispered, looking at me with such pain that I could barely stand her gaze. I could not answer. I just sat there, feeling something cold and black unfold inside me. I spent the next few days in the hospital sitting next to Emily. She didn't speak much, and when she did, her voice was quiet, as if she had lost all her strength. I couldn't understand why I was staying. Wasn't this the moment I wanted? She was ruined, broken. But instead of satisfaction, I felt only emptiness. Once the doctors allowed us to talk, I got up the courage. "Why did you do it?" I asked, watching her face. Emily turned her gaze to the window. Her eyes, once full of life, now looked exhausted. "Because there was no point," she replied. "You won, Randall. You destroyed me. You got everything you wanted. Her words hit me harder than I could have imagined. It was not just pain. It was the realization that I had crossed a line I should not have crossed. You ruined everything yourself, I said, trying to convince not only her but also myself. Emily smiled bitterly. Have you ever asked why I did it? I was silent. All these months I was caught up in my own pain, my own anger. I was looking for justice, but I never tried to understand what had led her to this point. Of the act. I know I owe you, she said, but you were distant, Randall. You were there for me, but never with me. I was looking for warmth, for understanding, and I made a mistake. I wanted to object, but her words stopped me. I saw my reflection in the window glass and realized that revenge had made me look like a monster. I don't know if you can forgive me, she whispered, but I can't forgive myself anymore. The room was silent. I had nothing to say. Over the next few days, I began to rethink everything that had happened. My revenge didn't just destroy Emily. It destroyed me, too. The days in the hospital stretched on like an endless chain. I sat next to Emily, watching her feeble attempts to find herself again. She was a shadow of the woman I had once loved, and my heart was clenched with pain. I didn't tell her how I arranged everything. She didn't know that I sent evidence to her work, I organized the spread of rumors, I created a website with evidence of her betrayal. But now, looking at her, I asked myself, why? One day, while she was napping, I decided to leave the hospital and take a walk. In a park nearby, I met Tom. He happened to be there and immediately recognized me. Randall? How are you? He asked, looking at me with a strange mixture of curiosity and sympathy. I don't know, Tom. All of this has brought me nothing but pain, I answered, lowering my head. He nodded but did not answer immediately. Then he added. You can't change the past, but you can change what happens next. I returned to the hospital, and a decision was ripe in my mind. In the evening, when Emily woke up, I sat down next to her and took a deep breath. Emily, I did everything I could to destroy you, I said bluntly. I thought it would make me stronger, but I only became as destroyed as you. She looked at me in surprise, but remained silent. It was I who sent the evidence of your treason. I was the one who spread the information that destroyed your reputation. I wanted you to suffer. Her eyes filled with tears, but she did not turn away. Why are you saying this now? She whispered. Because I can't live with it anymore, I replied. You made a mistake, and so did I. We both destroyed what we had. Her shoulders shook, and I saw her start to cry. But they were not tears of pain, but seemed to be relief. I don't know if I can forgive you, she finally said, but I can't hate you either. We were silent for a long time, sitting next to each other. I did not expect forgiveness and did not ask for it. But it was the first step to something more than revenge. A few months passed. The doctors discharged Emily, and she moved into a small. I moved into a rented apartment where I started a new life. I tried to move on, too. But now my life had a new meaning, Jake. His laughter, sincerity, and innocence reminded me that there was still purity in this world that could not be lost. I continued to work, spending evenings with my son and returning at least some normalcy into our home. But something still pulled me back to the past. One day I received a letter. It was from Emily. Randall. I know that we have destroyed each other. I know that I will never be able to regain your trust or justify my actions. But I want you to know that I am trying to change. I started going to therapy. It's not easy, but I finally realized how far my mistake went. I also realized that your actions were motivated by the pain I caused. I don't know if we can ever be friends, but I'd like to try. Not for us, but for Jake. He deserves better than that. Thank you for saving me, even after I betrayed you. Emily. I read this letter several times. For the first time in all this time, I felt neither anger nor guilt, but something like reconciliation. A few days later, I invited Emily to meet me. We sat down in the park while Jake played. Not far away. Her appearance had changed, she was a little thinner, a little older, but her eyes no longer seemed empty. "How are you?" I asked. "Better," she replied, "but I know there is still a long way to go." We talked about Jake, about plans for the future. There were no promises, no false hope. But there was an agreement. We both realized that this was the beginning, even if it didn't include living together. That evening, when I got home and put Jake to bed, I sat down in the kitchen with a cup of coffee. I realized that revenge no longer made sense. It was taking more from me than I could bear. Emily betrayed me, and I returned the favor. But now we were both trying to build something new, not together, but for the sake of our son growing up in a world where there was still a chance for reconciliation. And that was all that mattered.